If you watched part 1, you know the pattern by now. Someone in a position of authority decides that the rules don't apply to them, runs an experiment that crosses every ethical line imaginable, and then when it all falls apart, the response is always the same: shut it down, classify the files, and pretend it never happened. Today, we have 10 more, and somehow, these might be worse. Let's get into it. In 1953, the US Atomic Energy Commission launched a study to measure how much radioactive strontium-90 from nuclear testing was making its way into the human food supply. The problem was that strontium-90 accumulates in bone tissue, particularly in growing bones. So researchers needed bone samples from growing people. Over the next several years, scientists collected more than 1,500 bone samples from young people who had passed in hospitals across the United States, Canada, Europe, Australia, and South America. The bones were analyzed for strontium-90 without the knowledge or consent of the parents. The parents were told the remains were being handled for routine purposes. They were not told the bones were being shipped to laboratories for nuclear fallout research. The project was eventually exposed in the 1990s, and the government apologized. The data was real, the science was real, the way they got the samples was something nobody should have ever signed off on. In the 1950s and 60s, the CIA operated a program out of Istanbul, Turkey, where they tested experimental interrogation techniques on foreign nationals who had no idea they were being used as test subjects. The program was part of the broader MK-Ultra umbrella, but this specific operation targeted people at overseas locations where US legal protections didn't apply and oversight was essentially non-existent. Subjects were given illicit substances, including LSD and other experimental compounds, without their knowledge, and then interrogated to test whether chemical substances could force compliance, extract information, or erase memory. The full scope of what happened in Istanbul remains classified. What is known comes from partially declassified documents and the testimony of a handful of operatives. From 1955 to 1975, the US Army Chemical Corps conducted classified human subject research at the Edgewood Arsenal facility in Maryland. Over 20 years, roughly 7,000 soldiers were used as test subjects. They were told they were participating in routine equipment testing, but what actually happened was that they were exposed to LSD, BZ, which is a powerful deliriant that causes hallucinations lasting up to 3 days, sarin nerve gas, VX, and other chemical agents. Many were not told what they had been given until after the experiments were over. Some were never told at all. Soldiers reported severe psychological effects lasting years. The program was finally shut down in 1975 after an Army Inspector General's report concluded that informed consent procedures had been inadequate. The full records were classified for decades. When they were partially declassified, many veterans who had been tested on didn't even know what had happened to them until they read about it in a newspaper. From 1962 to 1973, the US Department of Defense conducted a series of classified tests known as Project SHAD, Shipboard Hazard and Defense. The purpose was to determine how vulnerable US Navy warships were to chemical and biological weapons attacks. Over the course of the program, more than 5,000 military personnel, mostly Navy and Marine Corps, were exposed to live chemical and biological warfare agents, including sarin nerve gas, VX, and the bacteria that causes Q fever. The soldiers were not told what they were being exposed to. They were told these were routine operational tests. Some were standing on deck when aerosolized agents were sprayed over their ships. Others were inside sealed compartments when the agents were pumped through ventilation systems. The government denied the program's existence for 3 decades. When Project SHAD was finally declassified in the early 2000s, many of the veterans who had been tested on didn't learn what had happened to them until they read about it in a newspaper. Yes, this is just like the last one. Clearly, people don't learn. During the Second Sino-Japanese War and World War II, the Japanese Imperial Army operated a secret biological and chemical warfare research unit called Unit 731. Under the command of General Shiro Ishii, Unit 731 conducted experiments on prisoners of war and civilians that are among the most disturbing in all recorded history. They exposed victims to frostbite to study the effects of extreme cold on human tissue, freezing limbs solid, then testing different methods of thawing, including open flame, hot water, and cold water immersion to determine which method preserved the most tissue. Many victims lost limbs, many died. The unit also conducted vivisections, forced infections, and weapons testing on living human beings. After the war, the United States granted Ishii and his researchers immunity from prosecution in exchange for their research data. The full extent of what was done was buried for decades. Ishii never faced trial. He died of natural causes in 1959, and I don't know, I genuinely don't have any kind of joke or anything for this one. Before there was MK Ultra, there was Artichoke. Approved in 1951, Project Artichoke was the CIA's first formal program for experimenting with interrogation techniques, and it was more aggressive than anything that came after. The project's mandate was to determine whether a combination of drugs, hypnosis, and psychological coercion could be used to force subjects to reveal information against their will and then forget they had revealed it. The CIA tested a multitude of mind-altering illicit substances and experimental combinations on both willing and unwilling subjects. They explored whether hypnosis could be used to make someone commit an act they would normally find morally repulsive. The project specifically targeted prisoners, foreign nationals, and suspected double agents. Records indicate that at least one subject lost their lives during an Artichoke interrogation. The full scope remains classified. Artichoke was absorbed into MK Ultra in 1953, but the techniques developed under Artichoke became the foundation for everything that followed. Between 1946 and 1948, US researchers led by Dr. John Cutler deliberately infected approximately 1,300 Guatemalan prisoners, psychiatric patients, and soldiers with syphilis and other sexually transmitted diseases. They wanted to study the effectiveness of penicillin as a preventative treatment. The subjects were not told what was being done to them. They were not asked for consent. Some were infected through direct inoculation, others were infected by being provided with infected sex workers, and at least 83 people died as a result. When the study ended, the results were buried. They stayed buried for over 60 years. While MK Ultra was testing drugs on people, MK Naomi was stockpiling weapons to kill them. In 1949 to 1970, the CIA and the US Army Biological Warfare Laboratories operated a joint program to develop and maintain a covert stockpile of biological weapons for assassination and sabotage. The program maintained cultures of anthrax, smallpox, tuberculosis, and other lethal pathogens. They developed delivery systems including poisoned pens, contaminated handkerchiefs, and specialized spray devices designed to kill or incapacitate specific targets without leaving evidence. MK Naomi was reportedly used in at least one attempted assassination against Congolese independence leader Patrice Lumumba, though the biological weapon was apparently never successfully deployed. During apartheid, the South African Defense Force ran a program at a military hospital outside Pretoria from 1969 to 1987. Between 900 and 1,200 LGBTQ+ service members were identified, arrested, and forced to undergo treatment designed to cure their homosexuality. The treatments included electroshock therapy, hormone treatments, and in some cases, forced surgical gender reassignment operations, performed without genuine consent. Patients who couldn't be cured were given medical discharges that destroyed their military careers and made them unemployable. When apartheid ended, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission heard testimony from survivors. Levin fled to Canada, was later convicted of sexually assaulting patients in his private practice, and was sent to prison. But not for what he did to hundreds of soldiers under military authority. For that, nobody was ever held accountable.